Members, visitors and guests, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 37th meeting of this Rotary year and 5,028th meeting in our 103rd year. Wonderful to see you all today. Our guest speaker today is Tony Pearce, Inspector General for Emergency Management and Board Chair, Victorian Emergency Services Foundation. Tony will be speaking on Tony's Trek, a long walk in support of mental health for Victorian emergency service workers, and will be more fully introduced later in the program by our Chair of the Day, Peter Hanlon. Accompanying Tony is Susan McKenzie, CEO, Emergency Services Foundation. Would you please join me in acknowledging it and making them both welcome? Thank you. I now call on Peter Berg, Club Safe Families Ambassador, to update us on the Rotary Safe Families Inclusive Communities Initiative project. Peter.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Chris, to have this short presentation on the Rotary Safe Families project, which is currently underway. Look, sadly, violence, including family violence directed towards women, is all too prevalent in our society. One woman a week in Australia is being murdered by a partner or a former partner. And Rotary Melbourne has taken a strong position on the prevention of family violence with the adoption 6 years ago of the Rotary Safe Families Guide on the prevention of family abuse, which our club, through Mary Barry and Dorothy Gilmore, created. Importantly, the guide has been translated into 8 other languages, which led to the idea that it could be used in a project in the culturally and linguistically decaled communities. The project is called the Rotary Safe Families Inclusive Communities Initiative, which we refer to as the ICI, and it began 18 months ago as a collaboration between Rotary Melbourne and Rotary Hawthorn, with an initial focus on the local Australian African communities. We're one of the Safe Families Guide, where the Safe Families Guide has been translated into Swahili and Arabic. Ahmed Toha, our Rotary Melbourne colleague, confirmed that the local Australian African networks would benefit from the ICI program. The project is centred on a workshop model for presentations to community leaders in Australian African communities for the leaders to take the important safe family messages to their members. The local Australian African communities are not being singled out as having a bigger issue with domestic violence than other communities across Australia. And as Rosie Batty, the champion advocate for preventing family violence, has said, family violence does not discriminate. No matter how nice your house is, no matter how intelligent you are, family violence can happen to anyone. The ICI leadership team consists of 8 members from 5 Rotary clubs, with 1 in Kenya, and includes 4 members who were born in Africa. Lukman Lawal from Rotary Richmond, who is here today as our guest, has recently joined the ICI team from an introduction arranged by Chris Wong. Thus far, the project has seen the creation of a short film in Swahili, radio interviews at SBS Somali Radio and SBS Swahili Radio for broadcasting the safe family messages to their Australian communities via a podcast, collaborations underway with 3 local Australian African community groups, with more collaborations expected, and that certainly will be with APRI Auscare, where Dorothy Gilmore's previously done work, and where Robert, Jim and Bernie are mentoring on a regular basis young men out there. The groups we are collaborating with are firstly Changepreneurs, whose vision is to empower young coloured women through outreach, education and mentorship. Abiola Akinbi, the founder of Changepreneurs, was guest speaker at a club lunch in February. Richard Dent, our MC today, arranged this introduction. Secondly, there's the East African Women's Foundation, with a membership of 200 women across the western suburbs, which provides advocacy and referral services on a variety of issues, including homelessness, mental health and family violence. And Ron Moss at Rotary Caroline Springs introduced us to the African Youth Initiative, which has been formed by a group of young Sudanese men, also in the western suburbs, in response to the disengagement of African youth within their communities. Mentoring programs have been created to empower younger Australian Africans to be positive contributors in our society. And finally, representatives from other CAL communities have reached out to connect to Rotary Safe Families. The showcasing of Rotary Safe Families and the ICI project attracted a lot of interest at last weekend's district conference in Bendigo, with a number of requests from Rotary clubs for presentations. And look, a big thank you to Rotary Melbourne, as its significant funding support for the ICO project is important in ensuring its success. And the members obviously make up the Rotary Melbourne. So thank you to all Rotary Melbourne members. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. What a great initiative, and also reflective of the club starting this initiative, but also now moving into the inclusive element through our diverse community. I have a couple of visitors and guests that I'd like to acknowledge, and when I call out your name, please stand, in addition to those that have brought you here. So Nushan Anguru, guest of Bernie McIntosh. Lawal Lukman, guest of Safe Families Ambassador, Peter Berg. And Jeffrey Zia, guest of Amit Gill. And Aaron Templeton, guest of Stephen Rando. So thank you. Welcome to both of you, to all of you. Today we have member anniversary, Jenny Tiang, 11 years, Jeremy Oates, 22 years, so well done to them. In relation to the Environmental Award, we need help in finding schools to apply for the 2024 Environment Award, recognising their efforts for the environment. If you have any connections with secondary schools, we'd love to hear from you. Please inform Joe, and flyers are on the table. Congratulations for the Onto Conference team of Debbie Infu, Sue Smith and Mary Barry. From what I understand, was a wonderful few days leading up to our district conference in Bendigo last weekend. I hear it was fascinating, but as they say, what happens on Onto Conference stays at Onto Conference. No, seriously. It's a great mechanism for fellowship, fun, food, and fact-finding from many members and partners that joined in the activity. Shortly, in a couple of weeks, we have the Thomas Baker Oration. Next week, in fact. And promises to be a fantastic event with keynote speaker, Dr. Doug Hilton, AO, CEO of the CSIRO. Bookings in advance are necessary to confirm with Sofitel events teams, as we'll be hosting downstairs on level 1, the Latrobe dining room. Please make sure you book in the next day or so. And next, Stephen Rando, we have the Run the Tan initiative that you're part of, and we're pleased to have one of the founders here as well, Mr. Templeton, who I'll just ask to pop up and give us a bit of information about. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Stephen, for inviting me to come along. I won't take up too much of your time. I just want to introduce who I am and what Run the Tan is about. I founded Run the Tan back in 2019 to create some movement around the benefits of exercise and running on our mental health. We run an annual showcase event around the Botanical Gardens called the Tan Track, if you haven't been around there lately. We're in our 4th year. The event is on this Sunday. The event's made up of 5 feature events, including our Olympian Elite events, Battle of the Schools, so all the schools around the area, celebrities and emergency services and general public. So Emergency Service Foundation are one of the beneficiary charities of the event. And so we've got the police and fireys and ambulance and all those first responder communities coming on and get involved. So we raised $67,000 for mental health last year. We're wanting to better that this year. We're always looking for supporters and donors and people to get involved with its volunteering and so forth. So if you've got any questions, I'm going to hang around, so come and see me later on. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks, Aaron. That's a great initiative. Movement as part of what we need for mental health makes a big difference in running around the tan. And of course, we have our representative here this year, Stephen Rando. So if you're interested in involving yourself in the fundraising element, feel free to have a chat to Stephen and Aaron afterwards. All right, now it's my pleasure to call on Chair of the Day, Peter Hanlon, to fully introduce today's speaker.
Yeah, my name is Peter Hanlon, and it's my pleasure today. Can we hear okay? Okay. No? Okay. Is that better? Okay. It must be my Liverpool accent, I think, but anyway. It's my pleasure today to welcome Tony and Susan back to the club. Tony came here in 2022 to talk to an event he was undertaking, a marathon 1,500 kilometres across rural Victoria. to raise funds for the Emergency Services Foundation innovative mental health and treatment programs that they were going to pursue. I was there at the MCG in 2023 when Tony, after those 1,500 kilometers, walked into hundreds of applauding people on the achievement of the event and raised considerable funds for those programs. Tony promised to come back and give the club a view of his experiences and insights over that trek, and he's here today to do that. So it's great to see you, Tony, and a pleasure to welcome you to the podium.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much, everybody. While I'm just waiting for my laptop. Well, not my laptop, but the laptop that we'll be using. There we go. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Just want to thank you all for the opportunity to come back again today just to talk a little bit about Tony's trek, what we did achieve on the first one. Timing's actually good, Stephen. Thank you very much for the contact along the way. It's good to actually put a face to the name. We've sort of been bouncing backwards and forwards on emails for a while, but originally I was going to be here in March, on March the 6th, which would have been 2 days before Tony's Trek 2024, which has now been completed. So I think there was a bit of a strategy there to make sure I actually hung out and came back and talked about both. So I will talk about both Tony's Treks today, just to give you a bit of a feel for how that's all gone. Now, let's just make sure this works. Okay, not a problem. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what Tony's Trek is and how it came about, I was, and there's a video that I'll show you shortly that will sort of go a little bit through this again shortly, but not in great detail. I was sitting on the veranda literally in 2021. My wife and I were having a bit of a drink on a nice summer's afternoon, and I'd been stewing on a couple of things. One was statistics that had appeared in 2018 and that the foundation bases a lot of its work on those statistics from the National Mental Health and Wellbeing Study of Police and Emergency Services survey that was conducted by Beyond Blue at the time while Julia Gillard was in the chair. And that was a national survey, 21,000 participants from around the country, emergency service workers from 33 different agencies, that was looking to get a bit of an idea as to what did mental health look like in our emergency service organisations. And I think it's fair to say that it was a pretty ugly picture that it painted at the end of the day. So that was 2018. Right up to today, I would suggest that things probably are not a lot different. There has been certainly movement in that time, but I think for our emergency service workers, they are still suffering the same issues. And you only have to look at the work cover premiums and work cover claims in Victoria alone, and this would be replicated right around the country to see that things have just got worse in the context of mental health in our sector. So I've been stewing on those figures, and not so much because I was fixated on that report. However, at the time that I was thinking about this Tony's Trek concept, a son of a friend of mine had taken his own life, who was an emergency service worker, and I had lost a number of mates over the years to the same issue, and it was clear to me that things were didn't appear to be settling down for all of the efforts of government and all of the efforts of agencies. So I'd been stewing on that. I'd been stewing on the fact that I'd just lost another friend, or the son of a friend, through the same issue. So I thought, for all of the work we were doing in the foundation, was there something more maybe that we could have a crack at that might be able to start to have a bit of an impact? And then I thought, well, if you're going to do something, you need to make it pretty big, because if you don't make things big, people won't say to you why you're stupid enough to do it, and that opens the door, that starts the dialogue going. So I thought, okay, it's got to be pretty big. And then I thought, oh, maybe I might go and walk from Melbourne to Brisbane. That's pretty big. So I was talking to my wife about it, and she said, why would you do that? You're a Victorian organisation that works in the Victorian environment, and whilst it's very noble to want to walk to Brisbane, that's fantastic. New South Wales and Queensland people are probably not going to be that interested in donating to you along the way, because it's not about them. Therefore, that's probably not such a good idea, but the concept's good. Why don't you think about how you can actually make that work in Victoria? And you'll see very shortly where we actually transferred that walk to, and it's a little bit more than the walk to Brisbane in distance, but it transferred nicely into Victoria. 3 reasons that I was doing it. One is I was really keen to continue to try and raise awareness of the impact of mental health injury in our sector, because it is greater than it is in the broader Australian population, which you'll see on the slide in a minute. I also wanted to raise awareness of our foundation and the magnificent work that Susan does as the CEO, with a very small team in our foundation, to work with our emergency service colleagues to try and help improve mental health outcomes for them. And of course, at the end of the day, the CEO is also responsible for raising money, and her comment to me was, if you're going to be stupid enough to do this, you might as well raise $1 while you're at it. and that will help inform, help sort of resource some of our programs as well. So then, of course, fundraising became one of our objectives. I just tried clicking that and it didn't work, so I'll try clicking that and it did work. That's all I got it. I've figured the touch screen, so I'll use that. This slide here is really just a very high-level summary slide. Some of you at the back probably won't be able to see the figures. I'll apologise for that, so I'll sort of give you a bit of guidance as to the ones that are really important. All of them are important. It's interesting, second one down on the left-hand side, that whilst all of those other boxes are negative, I guess, in the context of mental health impact, our sector, though, reported that 2 in 3 of our volunteers reported having high levels of resilience. And it's interesting when you read all of the other boxes and see the impacts, to then see that box to understand maybe what does that actually mean. And for me, when I read it, I was wondering whether or not that was as much about them being positive and have a positive outlook, even though their mental health was being impacted, rather than necessarily being resilient. But it's an issue, because resilience as a concept is one that can be debated about what does that actually mean in reality, and it's different. It's a bit like beauty, the eye of the beholder thing. Resilience is different depending on who you speak to and how they interpret what that means for them. But it was good to see at least that there was a concept and a belief that within the volunteer ranks that they were resilient. The other boxes, though, are not quite so good. And the one that was really, because I've already indicated about the loss of life in this context, was that one down the bottom that I've circled in blue. And for those at the back that can't see it, it says, employees and volunteers report having suicidal thoughts over 2 times higher than adults in the general population, and that's an Australian Bureau of Statistics figure, that's not one of ours, and are more than 3 times more likely to have a suicide plan. Now, once you are in the situation where you have a suicide plan, you are in a very bad place, and very often people will act on that. And those figures for me were the very bottom of, or the very pointy end of what all of these other figures were telling us. Some of them here, for example, 3 in 4 employees found the current workers' compensation process to be detrimental to their outcomes. And we've talked with WorkCover in Victoria, and I know with other jurisdictions similarly, and they are looking very closely at how can they improve their systems and streamline their systems more, so as when you do get into the system and you are going through that process, you are not further impacted by the system itself. Unintentional, obviously, but it shows you that systems do have a very significant impact on things. 1 in 4 former employees experience probable PTSD compared to 1 in 10 current employees. So those who are currently in the system, 1 in 10 of those potentially suffering PTSD or symptoms of it. However, once they've been through their career and they get to the back end and they're out, that figure jumps significantly to 1 in 4. So as you can see, without going through all of the boxes, there is an issue within our sector that is far greater than that in the general population. And that's what it is that the foundation is trying to work on. And they are also the issues that I was trying to address when it came to conducting Tony's trek. So what I'm going to do now, hopefully it will work, is play this short video. When I say short video, it's 7 minutes, so you won't have to listen to me, but it's a video, I guess, that really does give you an understanding of what we were doing, why we were doing it, and also the impact that we believe it's having on our sector. So I'll hit this again, and fingers crossed. All right.
So I was actually on the front veranda. I was sitting at home with Carol having a glass of Shiraz on the front veranda, and we're having a bit of a chat, and I said to her, you know what, I think I'm going to go for a walk. And she thought I actually physically meant right there and then. So she said, well, are you actually going to finish your wine first? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm talking about a much bigger walk than that. So what exactly is Tony's Trek? It's a almost 1,500 kilometre trek heading from Melbourne down to Mallacoota on the far east. Once I get to Mallacoota, I turn around and come back to Nowa in East Gippsland. I'll then head north over the Alpine Range, over the top of Mount Hotham, to Wodonga, and then from Wodonga back down to Melbourne again. The reason I'm doing it is because I've been in this sector for many, many years, as many of you have who might watch this, and we've all seen people who've suffered with their mental health as a result of the work that they do. And it's not only the accumulation of the types of jobs that they go to, but organisational culture and those sorts of things all contribute, and it makes life for some people very, very difficult. And unfortunately, I've had colleagues who've taken their lives along the way, and I had one more recently around the time that I made the decision to do this, where I thought, you know, we must be able to do better than this. There's so much work goes in by agencies and the government to make sure that when people get sick, they've got lots of really good support around them and they can be helped. But I believe that we can do far more at the front end to try and help prevent people from getting to that point where they actually fall off the cliff, if you like, and need so much care. Well, we've got 139,000 paid and volunteer emergency response and support workers in our sector. That's a lot of people, and a lot of people do struggle. And as many of you would know, often they don't want to step up and they don't want to say they've got a problem. But we'll actually help them come forward and will help us to help them. Finally, the day has come. We're at the State Control Centre, as you can see, and everybody's turned up for the launch, which is fantastic. 12 months of training and messing around and all of the trials and tribulations that come with that have finally passed, and it's actually very real today. So I'm looking forward to getting through this, getting out on the road and actually starting to get the walk done. There we go. There we go. Thanks everybody. Come on guys, let's go. Thank you. I chose the route because it's an area, of course, that the fires went through in 2019 and 20, so that was really pretty important to me, and I know that many emergency service workers down in the east and the far northeast have really suffered as a result of those fires.
It's great to get all of the town's emergency services together, so the SES, the ambulance and CFA, have a yarn, talk about the positives and actually not talk about incidents. We've decided amongst the leaders of each service that we're going to make it a quarterly event. So the SES have already put their hand up for the next one. It's a great thing that Tony's helped pull us all together, and we're going to try to keep that united feeling going forward.
My experience was a really horrendous 2 years, 96, 97, that culminated in Threadbow, and colleagues from the old MFB that I worked with, everybody started to fall off and struggle in a really, really big way, and I had no idea what was going on. That was my problem. I was scared about what I was going to do next because I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing at the time. I went and got some help, and once I started to get my head around what was actually going on, I was able to start managing that. And then as things occurred over the next number of years, that got that little bit easier.
Day 19, there's 23 kilometres and that's done and dusted.
You just clocked over just 100 metres up the road, 1,000 kilometres, and I've walked a fair bit in my time, but I've never walked 1,000 k's in consecutive days. It's pretty awesome.
It's great trying to bring awareness around wellbeing, especially as a CFA peer. We spent a lot of time in Corryong and the Dowers Valley group after the 2019-2020 fires, talking to people about welfare. It's a bit of a taboo subject in emergency service, and I think through initiatives like Tony's, trying to bring out the awareness of wellbeing in these areas is really great.
I'm from Harryville CFA, and I've walked from Smoko to Pupunka, about 24 kilometres. We learned so much, we met so many different people. We've wanted to see the youth join in along the way, cutting together for a great cause.
I first for his feet, minus or I only did 20 k's.
The support we've had along the way has been incredible, from agency personnel, volunteers, paid staff. Has been fantastic. Local communities, when they found out what we're doing, have just been all... Everywhere we've gone, the hospitality has been incredible. People driving our safety and escort vehicle and supporting us, people providing meals, people providing accommodation. It's just been incredible, but it shows that it means something significant to them.
It's really important that we get people when they're a little bit wobbly rather than when they get to the end of the road, and have that early intervention, which is so important, which is what Tony's Trek is all about.
So people have asked me a couple of times, why would I spend 50 days walking around half of Victoria and put myself through something that's obviously going to be difficult and painful? When I first got asked the question, I thought, well, because it's a good thing to do and I've got a purpose behind it. But when I really think about it, at the end of the day, yes, it is hard, and I'm pretty tired now, I can tell you, almost at the end of it. However, when this is finished, then it finishes for me. It's as simple as that. I get to rest and everything's fine. However, those people who are suffering with their mental health, they will still have a mental health issue that they've got to struggle with.
feeling pretty good overall, but my legs are getting real heavy. I think your body actually starts to override your mind. We were just walking across the road over there, and I've stumbled a few times now, and they feel heavy. I normally walk a lot further, but I think the legs actually know we're here, and they just want to stop, I think. I've been with hundreds of people over this last few weeks, and I've loved every minute of it, but I've got my family coming over with the boys and their partners and the grandkids this weekend, and I get to meet my little granddaughter for the first time, who was born 3 weeks ago, and I haven't met her yet. That'll be beautiful. The support we've had from right the way around from everyone has been totally amazing. Through you to your organisations, thanks so much for that.
Yeah, so as I say, that video gives you a bit of a sense of what it was about and why, and as you can see there, some things that came out of it we really weren't quite predicting. I guess was one of the fellows who was talking early on there was saying, you know, he had sat down with his fellow leaders from other organisations in his town, and they decided that they were going to have this regular, ongoing catch up to talk just about mental health and to talk positively about it rather than the issues that cause the problems and those sorts of things. So they were little legacy things that came out of it that we really hadn't anticipated. And Susan and I were there that night at that fire station, and they did that whilst they were sitting down having their dinner. They didn't sort of wait till later on for meetings. They decided right there and then that it was important enough to commit to them to doing that. So the trek in 2020, oh, hang on now. You got that yellow frame. Yeah, I was going to say that thing at the bottom. I really don't like this zoom, I can tell you. There we go. That's got rid of it. Thank you. Some of the stats, I guess, that were important in relation to it. 10th of March to the 5th of May, so it was 50 days. Ended up being 1,506 kilometres, so that was nice. I was really determined to get it over that 1,500. We were that close, so I thought, why would you stop short of 15? 43 locations, as in townships that we went through. Some of those twice. That was the ones effectively from East Gippsland down to Malakuta and then back again because we obviously had to come back. So we stopped at those a couple of times through. 144 guest walkers. When I say guest walkers, they weren't invited. These were people that signed up individually just to walk parts of it. Some of them did whole days, some did a couple of hours, whatever. But in the time that they were walking, again, something else that I hadn't anticipated was the value of providing them with an opportunity to be on their own with someone just to talk. So whilst when they said they wanted to walk, we're saying, yeah, that's great. I thought that's terrific that they're doing that. But what they did, the majority of them, was use that as an opportunity to talk to me about their issues or the issues of friends or family members that they have and how that was impacting them. Now, look, I'm not a counsellor and so on, and it was really important to make sure that I didn't spend 8 or 10 hours a day every day just listening to that. So I was able to sort of divert some of the discussion where need to be, but it provided that opportunity. And I guess the important thing that came out of that, and I spoke to the agencies about later on, was saying, and this will be the same for broader community too, but if you provide people with the opportunity and a safe place, they will use it. For us, we were walking along highways with trucks going past at 110 kilometres an hour, right beside you, literally, but you'd have someone with you, and it was like being inside a bubble. They were talking to you there as if you were in a quiet room somewhere all on your own, just one-on-one with them. So again, I guess the learning for me is provide the opportunity for people and they will use that opportunity to talk. And the more they talk about it, the greater the chance is that they're actually going to potentially go and do something about the issues that they're actually talking about with a bit of encouragement and support. The fractured hip and the fractured tibia and so on, that was just some of the impacts, I guess, of it. We were meant to start this event in September the year before. Unfortunately, I fractured a hip training and ended up losing 6 months for that. So I had to get over that before I could go back to training again. So we lost that. And then 10 days out of finishing the thing, I had this sharp pain in my lower left leg. My wife thought to myself, because I was hobbling, she said, oh, he's done his hip again. And she started to have a crack at me about it. I was, nah, it's all good. It's just a soft tissue calf injury, you know. So we sort of battled on for the 10 days. And then when I went to the sports physician, she said, yeah, you fractured your tibia. So I had to get that fixed for the next 11 or 12 weeks. And of course, I lost half a dozen toenails, some of which you saw the start of on the screen there. 219,000 or thereabouts raised, which was really fantastic. And Rotary contributed significantly to that along the way, either through clubs themselves or through raising awareness through the towns that we were going on, particularly down through the east and some areas of the northeast of Victoria. So a big thank you again to Rotary in a general sense, and then again to those individual clubs. And I've got some names of some individuals down there who were really quite prominent in that process. So I really did thoroughly appreciate their support. $30,000 of that 219, I just need to mention because it'll become relevant in what I'm about to say to you in a minute, was raised by a couple of fellas who run a group called Side by Side Trek. One of them's an ex-paramedic mate of mine who I've worked with many, many years ago. The other one's a firefighter. They did a trek to Kokoda in the lead up to our trek, raised $30,000 and then donated that to this trek's cause, which was just fantastic. So again, great appreciation of the support that we got from them. So that was 2023, fantastic outcome. 5 weeks after we finished, there I am on my crutches in the garage, hobbling around, doing a few bits and pieces, and I get a phone call from Ian Hunt, who's the paramedic that I just mentioned a minute ago. And he said, look, we did Kokoda last year and we donated that money to your trek. He said, we're thinking about doing another event again, this time going to Everest Base Camp, see if we can get a few more emergency workers to come with us. And we'd like to raise some more money and again donate that towards the foundation. However, what we'd really love is, because Tony's Trek has got a pretty good brand at the moment, we'd love you to allow us to use Tony's Trek as the brand for that and do it quite properly. And would you be interested to sort of front that for us or otherwise? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And he said, maybe even join us. And I said, well, there I am on the crutches in the garage. And I said, when are you thinking about doing it? And he said, oh, March, March coming. And I went, okay. And I did a bad thing. I said yes straight away. I say it's a bad thing because I actually didn't bother speaking to my wife about it first. And as funny as, yeah, that might sound funny, but it was actually quite significant because obviously it was disrespectful not to do that. It had taken 2 years to get to Tony's Trek, the previous one, and our family had suffered quite a bit over that period of time. And here I was committing to another one without even talking to her about it. So I've sort of, I think I've made up for that since then. But it was important just to acknowledge Carol and the family when I said yes to this. But anyway, the idea of this one was that we go to Everest Base Camp. I said, yes, we do it. Susan and I met with Ian and Adam in East Melbourne at a cafeteria and had a bit of a chat to see about logistically whether we thought we could pull it off. We did. So we said we could. So we got it cranked up. We put the call out to our emergency service colleagues, thinking if we were lucky, we might get 8 or 10 of them. We had to shut it off at 27. And there were still more wanting to join us. But the group, the organisation that was actually leading it for us and guiding, said, look, we've never taken a group that big before and we're not going to go above that number now. So sorry, have to cut it off. So more would have joined us. Just looking at the map on there to give you a bit of a sense of how you can do this with Everest, you can either go from Kathmandu up the right-hand side as you see it there to Everest Base Camp, then come back down a little bit of a way, then go left on your screen as you're looking at it, around past Chola Pass and back down again. But we decided to go the other way, and we did that deliberately because A, it's harder and it's steeper all the way up than it is the other way. And part of what we were doing, of course, was trying to acknowledge the impact of mental health and the challenge that poses for our colleagues. So therefore, we wanted to make sure that the challenge of this was as big as we could make it in the context of the environment that we were in. So that was the idea. The good thing was 26 went up, 26 came back. So that was a really good outcome, and we got back 2.5 weeks ago. From that one, so that's the second one. And again, some stats on that, just to give you a bit of a sense of what we did. So it was from the 8th to the 29th of March, the total trek, but the actual trip from Lukla, for those of you who may have been there, up to Everest Base Camp and back again was 15 hiking days. 163 kilometres trek. Doesn't sound like a much over 15 days when you think about 1,506 kilometres over 50 days. However, in this environment, you're doing that. You literally are going up in a very steep environment, and you're also doing that at altitude too. So it's far, far more difficult in a different way than doing the original trek. And I can honestly say to you, I think physically and mentally, this was actually harder than the previous one I'd done. But maybe that's because I'm 64 and I'm getting old and I struggle a bit nowadays. So that's part of the problem. As I said, 26 trekkers from 7 agencies. We went through 13 villages, which were on that map a second ago. The 3 highest areas that we got to, Gokyo Ri, 5,483. That's an opportunity when you get up there to actually watch the sun set over Everest, which is really beautiful, and also all of the other major peaks around it, because there's quite a number of them. So everybody went up to there to see that. Kalapatar, which is another one that's even higher again, and you can watch the sun rise at Kalapatar. And some would say, well, why would you bother going and watch it set and rise as well? Well, it's 2 opportunities, I guess. They're 2 different peaks, so it was important to do that. And then, of course, base camp itself, which is at 5,362 metres, which is the photo there, as you can see, with everybody in front of it. My wife said, doesn't look like much, bunch of rocks, pretty much. And I said, well, it actually is nothing but a bunch of rocks. There's not a lot there. There's a very big glacier behind it that you see that is a start up then to the top of Everest from there. But really, it's quite sort of unflattering when you get there. But it's a very, very important part of the whole Everest story and the history of Everest, of course, and that's why people go there. We had no physical injuries, no broken legs, nothing like that, but we had lots of respiratory illness, lots of gastric illness. Some of our group was sick for quite a period of time, to the extent that they went virtually 3/4 of the way there sick and back again. So for them to achieve that, and to watch some of them do it, who were literally, if you were thinking from here to that checkered wall down there, the pace at times would see people take 2 or 3 minutes to get from here just to that checkered wall. So that's how slow some were having to go, and the altitude, of course, was impacting upon that further. Temperature ranges while you're up there, in case you're interested. -17 was our coldest, 2 degrees was our warmest, positively balmy, and wind chill -20, which was on the top of Gokyo Ri when we were there. And in fact, when we were there, the guide said, you know, we'll give you 5 minutes, then that's it. We've got to get back down again. Otherwise, people are going to get pretty sick at -20. So we came back down. The other great thing that we're all wrapped about that we survived was Lukla Airport. If anyone knows about that, it's renowned as being the most dangerous airport in the world. It's only 500 metres long, the runway. There's only 100 pilots that can actually get in and get out of it, and they have to have done a massive amount of short takeoff and landings to be allowed to go anywhere near it. It's got a 12-degree gradient, so when you're actually standing adjacent to the runway, as the planes take off, they actually go down like that, and you lose them behind the single-storey buildings because the gradient is so steep. And once they go, they just simply fly off the edge of the mountain, and that's it. And they either get up or they don't. And there are still plenty of remnants of aircraft there that actually haven't got up once they get off the end of the runway. So as you can imagine, for everyone sitting inside, it's a bit of an excitement thing for a little while. It's really nice once you hear it powering up, but yeah, it's a bit exciting for that first minute or so. So 11 accidents, 50-odd deaths there just on that one little runway. And for this trek, $37,000 or thereabouts we've raised as well, which then goes into the kitty, of course, with the other funds. I've got my gratuitous QR code there in case anyone wants to take a photo of it, because if you do, that'll take you to the donations page, so please feel free. The point I'll make, I guess, is that the money that we've raised is really it's really good that I'm doing this little presentation today, because this week, after a massive amount of work by Susan and some others who've supported her along the way, we've got our residential wellbeing centre pilot program up and running. And I talked about it back in 22 about that was what we were looking to fund, but effectively, and Susan can slap me if I don't get it quite right, but I'll give you a sort of a bit of an understanding of what it is. What we're looking to do is to bring together small groups of people who are at the very early stage of their mental health journey, I guess. They're not clinically diagnosed, they're not sick and falling off the cliff, as I explained before, but these are people who are getting a bit wobbly, a bit unsure, and starting to feel uncertain and not really knowing why they're feeling the way they are, and not understanding why they're having the impacts on their life that it's having. And this is an opportunity to bring them together in a setting with professionals who can actually help explain that to them. But really importantly, to spend time with those who can actually help, well, firstly, people who've been through it before, so it can give them some sort of understanding of what it is that's happening to them and what to expect, but also some people who can start giving them some advice and guidance and assisting them into how they can start managing themselves, anticipating what's coming, and then knowing where it is that you get to the point where you need to seek further assistance. But as I said in that video, you know, I'm a strong believer, as is Susan and our foundation, that if you get in really early with people, before they get really sick, there is a good opportunity to turn a lot of those people off the path to getting to the bad point. Some you won't, and they will just naturally get there, unfortunately, and it is what it is. But a lot of others can be helped along the way, so that's really what we're all about. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come today and talk about this, also for being able to slip in the second trek as well. I don't know what the future holds. I don't think necessarily it'll be me doing things. There's one more I've got in my mind that I'd like to do, but we'll see how that goes. But the idea of Tony's Trek in my mind was to start something and hopefully get enough momentum that it then became a self-perpetuating thing, if you like. So if Tony's Trek continues into the future with or without me, that would be fantastic. But if people then participate in things that help raise awareness of the issue, the foundation, and maybe help raise some more money for our foundation, that'd be great. So thanks again for the opportunity, and it's been terrific. And thank you to Rotary for all the support we've had.
That was great, Tony. I'm a Tony too, Tony Bettini.
Good on you.
I've worked with federal police and other emergency services. PTSD is a big issue. The people going into that job are actually higher in their resilience and probably more stable in some respects than other workers, and yet this is still an issue. What do we think is causing it?
It's interesting if you do get the time to read that national survey, that answering the call, that's really interesting, because I think most people's perceptions is it's about all the bad things we see, you know, so all the trauma that we experience and the bad jobs we go to, no matter which of the agencies we're in. I think most people in the public would assume that that's what it is. The reality is the thing that has a greater impact on people's mental health and so on in these agencies is poor organisational culture, poor management, poor leadership. So I think whilst there's obviously, for good reason, a lot of effort going into how do you reduce the potential for traumatic events to have a compounding effect on emergency workers, to some extent you can do that. To another extent you can't. People still have to go to those jobs. So therefore it's a bit about their own resilience as well as the support you can put in around them. But organisational leadership and the way you manage organisations is one where I think we can have a massive impact, because you can actually change behaviour in that context. And if you change behaviour in that context, you will certainly have an impact. And a lot of the people that walked with me validated that without me having to ask them by saying, you know what really pisses me off, pardon the French, but you know, the way my organisation does this, or the way that they don't listen to this, or something happens and no one will actually manage that issue for us, that's what hurts. And then you get the traumatic events and they compound that. The other thing is too, let's not forget, you know, I'm talking about the sector and our agencies here, but those people, once they take their uniforms off, are just the same as anyone else. They are community members. So the normal things that happen in a person's life are impacting them as well. This is stuff on top of that again. So I guess when you add all of that, that's why I think we see figures in the way that we do now. Yeah.
Robert Fisher, thank you, Tony. I think it's fair to say that there's a much greater awareness in the community now of mental health issues and the consequences. I'm interested to know, do you see signs of greater support for organizations like yours, or is it just the same continuing struggle?
I'm almost going to speak on behalf of Susan. Here, look at her. Look at that. She's got her arms. Look at the body language. Arm folded, grimacing. There's your answer. No, look, I think the reality is, I think there is an acknowledgement of organisations like ours, so that's great. We are acknowledged. People know we're around. Governments know we're around, etc. As far as trying to get genuine, very, very tangible support, that is very difficult. It is a battle every day of the year. And I know all not-for-profits and small organisations will say, you know, woe is us, give us some money. But the reality is that's the environment we find ourselves in. The bulk of our funding comes from a very small membership fee, effectively, that stakeholder agencies, 14 agencies and one associate member, actually provide to us to be stakeholder members, all the emergency service organisations and some others. If it weren't for that, we effectively couldn't keep the door open. That's what runs the organisation. After that, Susan's battling around trying to find grants, or she's trying to do this, or we're trying to do that, and you're battling everybody else. And it's a busy space. I mean, the foundation had to, and I can see nodding going on here from our man from Run the Tan, it's a very busy space. The mental health environment is, as you said, there's greater acknowledgement of the fact that it's an issue now, but also it means that everybody wants to get in there and have a play, and they want to do their bit. So for us, it was again important to try and find where is our part of this, to make sure that we're not replicating something that's going on elsewhere. We're not stealing someone else's thunder or their money or otherwise, but we're trying to make a difference in a space that we think is one where it's not being done well. So that's why we do what we do. But by virtue of that, it makes it even harder for us to then get resources and support, because, you know, it's like talking about mitigation in disasters. You know, if you talk about mitigation dollars to government, they'll go, oh, yeah, we get it, you know, spend one here, save 7 there, but not for 20 years. You can't hold that up at an election campaign. But what you can hold up is the stuff that you can fund right now, where you can see a benefit and change right there and then. And the early intervention part, unfortunately, is not one of those that lends itself to that. Yep.
Tony, Reg Smith.
Reg.
A quick question. Any takeout on the difference between trauma amongst volunteers in the emergency service space compared to the professional staff?
Yeah, we got to be careful. I won't say professional because we get belted around by that. Volunteers would say they're professional too. So paid and volunteer. I get your point though, Reg. Yeah, look, there are some interesting things there. I think the thing that became, and I've been in this sector for over 40 years, so I think the thing that was really crystallised for me whilst I was doing the trek was in the volunteer space. I won't say exactly where it is, but there's a part of the state where there's a very, very small unit from an organisation there that only has a very small number of people, and they are probably the road trauma capital of our state. So they are out day in, day out almost, and in fact, even on the trek, whilst we went through that particular area, there was a really very bad accident, and they all went screaming past us. And we pulled up to have some lunch, and we had to call a whole heap of people to say, by the way, that's not us involved in whatever they're going to, just to let people know, because they were so busy. But the leader of that particular unit said to me, you know what, Tony? He said, I'm old, I'm exhausted, and I've had enough, and I need to stop. He said, but I've been like that for a few years now, and I can't stop. And I said, why can't you stop? Why don't you just stop and walk away? He said, the reason I can't do it is because there is nothing there behind me. He said, there is no sustainable resource that sits behind me in our community that will actually go out and do this. He said, so if I don't do it, and the other three of them predominantly who turn out to everything, he said, if I don't do that and we don't do it, there's nobody else to do it. He said, but as a result of that, look what it's doing to me. So I guess for paid staff, they get to a point where things get bad, they get diagnosed, they get lots of support, they go off on work cover, et cetera, et cetera. For the volunteers, whilst the process is not too dissimilar, you need to also acknowledge the fact that they will impact upon their own mental health because they see it as an obligation in their community to keep doing what they're doing because nobody else will. And that's a battle, that's very difficult. And it's hard when you're talking to people, watching them. And this particular gentleman, Susan knows who I'm talking about, this particular gentleman, you look at him and you say, you know, there's a man who's got to stop. But he won't. He won't. So, yeah, so there are differences there and it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Tony, for that great achievement and a wonderful personal presentation. Rotary always makes commemorative gifts to speakers, so I've got a couple here that I will have the pleasure to present to you. Okay?